Please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
Numbers for us, Josh.
Kelly, let's get to those numbers. Apple reporting EPS of $2.07. Kelly, that's versus expectations of $1.87. Revenue, Kelly, $52.6 billion. That's versus an expectation of $50.7 billion. Gross margins 37.9%. iPhone units 46.7 million. iPads 10.3 million. Macs 5.4 million. Services up 34% to $8.5 billion. Other products, remember, that includes the watch, that was up 36% to $3.2 billion. As for that Q1 guide, Apple guiding here for a revenue guide of between 84 and 87 billion. Consensus called for 84.2 billion, and a Q1 gross margin guide here of between 38 and 38.5%. Kelly, back to you.
Josh, thank you very much. All right, they're up about 2.5% right now. John, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, on the gross margin, it didn't quite hit 40. I guess that's sort of expected when you've got a new design. But everything else, particularly the revenue guide of $84 to $87 billion, suggests they actually have some supply of the iPhone 10. That's what investors wanted to see. I think that's why you got the stock up about 2.5% right now after hours.
Ed, you were looking at when this top and bottom line number
astounded by these numbers here. It feels like Apple can't do anything wrong. I was actually really surprised by that services number. It's the fastest growing unit. It's the smallest, of course, as well. But 30+%, that's pretty astounding. They were growing 20% the quarter before. And yeah, and I'm with John. I think clearly the signs are good for the Q1 in terms of the new shipments for the 10.
Shares are up nearly 3% right now for Apple. We're also joined by Ross Gerber, who's an Apple shareholder, Gerber Kawasaki, and Apple analyst Angelo Zeno from CFRA Research. Ross, what do you think? What jumps out to you most about this report?
I'm super happy. I mean, you know, I've been really tough on Tim for about a year. I was hoping to God that they would innovate something. In the last 3 product releases, the watch, the TV, and now the iPhone X are just marvelous products. And I'm so happy. It's like not only that, they got through this quarter, which I was scared about, because the iPhone 8 I didn't expect anybody to buy, because why would you? And so, you know, we know that the sales are now going to be big for the iPhone X. It's a $1,000 plus phone, and it's got huge margins. So, you know, Apple's got a great runway going into 18. I'm excited.
Angelo, are these upgrade kind of numbers for you?
I mean, the numbers were great. I mean, we do have a buy recommendation on the shares. But overall, I mean, I don't think you could have expected anything better out of Apple's results here. I think overall for the September quarter results, you know, iPhone numbers came in line. I think the big surprise really is that services number, significantly better than we anticipated. You know, we were looking for about 18 to 20% growth. They blew that out of the water. And then, you know, looking at the December quarter, I think, you know, the fear was, of course, supply constraints for the iPhone 10. And it looks like, you know, you're not going to get, you know, as bad a feared kind of constraints that, you know, maybe some thought you would have had.
Yeah, great point. By the way, the shares looking at about $173.50 right now. I'd just like to multiply by 7 to get that pre-split number. It'd be over $1,200 right now, Stephanie. So we're talking about the race for market cap size for these mega valuations between Apple and Amazon just heating up.
I think people try to get cute with this stock, and I think what's really important is you don't want to get too down on a company that has a product cycle, especially one as powerful as this, in addition to having the services component, having the watch, having some of these other things that can be also additional catalysts. But clearly, the guidance was good, and I think sets up really well for next year. And again, I come back to some of the suppliers who are trying to tell us that things aren't so bad. They weren't great this past quarter, but they gave good guidance going forward. So obviously, they are feeling very confident.
And not to be overlooked, Ed, the iPad shipments, 10.3 million versus about the 10 million expectation for a category that's had its
You thought it was a dead
downs.
category, right? Yeah, exactly. No, people like it. I think, again, it's a big part of the Apple ecosystem. You know, you love the phone. Maybe you have the watch. Like, you just want to complete that circuit, right, of all these different things. What I really want to know more going forward here on the call is that services business. I really want to know how Apple plans to go forward with its media strategy. It's never really had a cogent media strategy in the past. They say they're going to spend $1 billion on original TV content. That's a start, certainly, but, you know, going forward, we're, you know, sports rights.
How important is that business for them?
Because I think that's going to be, again, it's the fastest growing part of the business. They have one of the best media platforms, if you think about it. Everyone who's got an iPhone, everyone's got an iPad. If they can sort of pump in or pipe in, you know, NFL content exclusive to that, that would be huge for them.
Is it worth them paying up big for that,
Yeah,
John, though? Because you know the other
that's not-
platforms are going to be competing, too.
I mean, it probably is. They've got a ton of revenue, and Apple likes to say on the product side, they're not going to build anything that doesn't need to exist, that anybody else could have done. But so far on the content side, that's exactly what they've been churning out, stuff that people have done before. Doesn't make a ton of sense. At some point, it seems like they need to make a big investment. On the guide, I want to point out, from the numbers I had seen, the consensus revenue expectation for the holiday quarter was just over $85 billion. The midpoint of the range Apple gave is higher than that. It's $85.5 billion. So there's plenty of room here if they are able to make more iPhone 10s than they estimate, and they tend to be conservative, for the number to be really good and for gross margins to be really good. So everybody who is fretting about these reports out of the supply chain, or they can't make the 10s, they're downgrading the sensor, all that, cold water on that. Always be cautious. It's something every year. Oh, the phone bends. Oh, if you hold it here, the antenna doesn't work. Now it's they can't make the sensor.
By the way,
sure,
they didn't
not
give the
true.
reviewers a lot of time with the phone.
with you,
know, they
John.
kind of, everybody. Go ahead, Ross. What were you going to say?
No, I'm totally with John there. I agree with you 100%. I wish they extrapolated that out to Tesla like today. But you know, the previous conversation where John was saying they need to do something big, I totally agree. And this is their opportunity to put $10 billion into Tesla, or get into the car, or get into the home, because they do need to think about the future. As far as the services and the TV strategy, they're making some very big moves here in LA. They've basically taken over Sony television. They've taken over the studio, the executives. They're putting $1 billion into projects. My sources are telling me they're looking at some pretty high quality projects. And so Apple's trying to do the Amazon strategy now of building the ecosystem through investing in it, through content.
Yep.
And I think the jury's going to be out whether this is really worth the money.
Ross, I'm not sure what that has to do with them putting $10 billion into Tesla. I mean, you know, I understand where you're going with that, that it's okay, you're going to own the platform, you want to own the vehicle, but, you know, is Tesla, I mean, is that the right move for a company that seems to be getting it right here in terms of their slate of offerings? They're talking about $10 billion in Tesla?
Well, I look at it as the other screen. You spend like probably an hour to 2 hours in front of your TV screen in your car, and with the car driving itself, you're going to be watching a lot more stuff on that TV in the middle of the Tesla. So does Apple want to cede control of your eyeballs during the time that you're driving? And I think that's something they should think about. What's $10
Angela,
billion
what
to
about
Apple?
you?
It's like a quarter.
Yeah, but come on, you know, it's discipline, right? I mean, Angela, what would you say about that?
No, I mean, when we look at the opportunities for Apple here in the coming years, I mean, we think it really is in autonomous cars, it is an area for growth, as well as kind of the streaming services business. If you look at what, you know, Tim Cook said earlier this year, expecting to double that services business here over the next 4 years, you know, we thought kind of they needed to really get big in TV streaming services to hit those goals. If you look at the services business here this quarter, they may not even need that. But that being said, we do see media as a bigger opportunity for the company near term. I think longer term, autonomous cars absolutely is an area that you know, Apple
But don't you
should
think
kind of get
media is
into.
just too difficult? I mean, I think media is so difficult with Netflix getting so many eyeballs.
You know, when you look at Apple's installed base over there, I think it's an opportunity they have that they can really capture and really, you know, take advantage of. So I do think that, you know, there's real potential there for Apple.
Steph, what would you say about that?
Well, I would agree. I mean, I think you have to be excited that they have a lot of opportunities, but I think it goes back to where do they have the most momentum right now, right? And I think it really is services. You had asked the question, how important is that? I mean, that is clearly a growth driver that no one really gave them credit for just a couple of years ago. And so I think that's really what I want to see them spend more money on, trying to grow that business, because of course it has more implications to margins.
Aren't
does
you a
that
little
look
bit
like
scared of
if they-
Spotify? I mean, don't you think there's competitors out there like Spotify that could really hurt
There's
Apple's
competitors
services?
everywhere. There's
Yeah,
competitors
but these are
everywhere.
good competitors.
Well,
I
but
mean,
that's the thing about
Spotify's making
Spotify.
moves.
But Spotify, the thing about Spotify and Apple Music, I mean, they both effectively have the same content on there. So it's a commodity service.
All right,
you want exclusive
hang
content.
on, everybody. Josh Lipton has more in these
That's
results.
true.
What have you got for us, Josh?
Kelly, I did just have the chance to speak briefly with Apple CEO Tim Cook about the quarter. We also touched on some news today, Kelly. Qualcomm suing Apple, alleging breach of contract, that Apple was apparently trying to help rival Intel. Of course, these two have been locked in a battle now for some time. I asked Cook, about that, as well as these reports, Kelly, that Apple's designing devices for 2018 that would not use Qualcomm components. Tim Cook declining to comment on the latter point. But as for this fight with Qualcomm, Tim Cook telling me the US FTC has sued them. The EU is investigating them. And so I think it's pretty clear that there are problems there. I asked Cook, you know, on CNBC, we talk a lot about how for Qualcomm, Apple's business is so important. But I asked Cook, listen, isn't Qualcomm important for Apple? As you design products in the future, don't you depend on Apple if you want to keep selling top-of-the-line products? Cook simply replying, no. So on to iPhone demand, Kelly. We talked about the iPhone 10, that the iPhone 10 demand was off the charts. I asked him if that meant higher than ever. He said that was difficult to compare, but because this is such a different kind of device. He said, this one is hard to read. We have 3 iPhones for the first time. We have staggered launch for the first time. And so there's a number of things we've never experienced before. I did ask Cook whether he thought they would come into supply-demand balance with the 10 in roughly a quarter, as with other models. He said he couldn't say for sure whether that was true right now. Of course, skeptics have countered, Kelly, you know, if that delay goes on too long, do consumers then move to the 8 or the 7? Cook said he wants people to have the phones they want. As for these various reports and rumors we've seen flying fast and furious, Kelly, about manufacturing problems plaguing the 10, Cook saying they were happy with where they were, in fact. The ramp was going well, and that was improving, in fact, every week. Kelly, back to you.
All right, Josh, great stuff. Thank you. Guys, Apple shares are now more than 3%. Anything from what we just heard from the CEO jump out at you?
I think Tim Cook is downplaying the Qualcomm issue too much. There is no mobile player in the world who can say that Qualcomm doesn't matter, period. Now, is one side right, the other side wrong? Who knows? A court will decide that.
But it is true, right, that these Qualcomm chips are the industry.
You need those chips to create smartphones. Right. It's that simple. You can't make a smartphone without them.
Intel or
you need the IP.
Other,
You need the intellectual property that Qualcomm provides. There are various ways at that. Apple doesn't use the application processor that Qualcomm provides, but hey, a lot of others do, and that's why Qualcomm's earnings were good yesterday. I think it's interesting. This is a stock that was down around 150 in late September because of all the fear, uncertainty, and doubt around this launch. So even though Apple's the most valuable company in the world, and people talk all the time, oh, there's all this hype around Apple, you got to remember, in these launch cycles with Apple, all of the rumors out there do really interesting things that investors need to pay attention to. People are saying nobody's going to pay for a $1,000 phone. They've really screwed up this time. Well, let's take a look at those.
And that's what makes it so interesting, that it's up 4% in the aftermarket,
What's
right?
The valuation here, even?
Well, it's still very attractive. It's still very attractive, especially, and you've got tons of boatloads of cash, right? Yeah. So then you get this tax situation.
That's exactly what I was
on top of that. So I think the story goes from being a product cycle 1 this year into next year, and then you have this tax tailwind in a big way. These guys normally give out their capital returns in April. That's about the time frame. So this whole tax plan is coming at a perfect time for them.
Over $200 billion in cash overseas. They bring it home.
$269 billion is the number. Angelo, what do you see as the impact on Apple from this tax plan if it's enacted first quarter next year?
Yeah, I mean, with regards to the tax plan here, I mean, I think overall the company looks to at least buy back about 10% of their shares from the money they repatriate here. And then I think the rest of it they kind of hold on to, look potentially for an acquisition that could make sense for them. But at this time, you look at what historically Apple has done. I mean, their largest acquisition has been that of Beats of $3 billion. So I just can't see at the moment them really kind of going out and doing some kind of enormous M&A deal. I think they could potentially reinvest some of it, but it's going to be primarily used, we think, for buybacks.
But let's get to Seema Modi here for a quick earnings alert on Tableau. Seema?
Hey, Kelly, big data analytics company Tableau Software reporting disappointing earnings, 8 cents ex items. The estimate was for 9 cents, but revenue too missing street expectations at $215 million versus the expectation of $219 million. Now, just digging through some of the other metrics, non-GAAP operating margins were light. Billings at $233 million. Also came in weaker than expected, and you're looking at the stock down more than 11%, but I would point out the stock is up over 60% year to date. Back to you.
All right, Seema, thank you. John, you want any reaction to that, or?
Actually, it was on something else. It was on Apple.
Well, why don't you just kick it off right here? John Force with us, Ed Lee, Stephanie.
It's Apple all the time. What else do you want to talk about? It's not Apple.
Apple is now up 3.5%.
Up 3.5%. We were talking a little bit about the services business in Apple, and I noticed something here in a footnote on services. It says services revenue in the fourth quarter of 2017 included a favorable one-time adjustment of $640 million due to a change in estimate based on the availability of additional supporting information. No idea what that means, except that $640 million worth of that services line that accounted for that 34% year-over-year revenue bump might have to do with accounting more than it does with the organic services business. So investors will want to watch out for that. I'm sure there'll be more questions about it on the call. On services, I also feel like Apple in some ways gets too much credit for this category because a lot of services isn't services. It's transactions.
Apps.
It's they're just selling
30% they take of in-app purchases, or
exactly. It's in-app purchases.
They're one-offs.
It's
That's the thing.
transactional, right? What you really want to see Apple build is things like Apple Music, services that people are specifically paying for, iCloud, things that are similar.
And I think that they're going to be doing that,
Microsoft
right? Don't you think? I mean, their strategy is not just to keep going down the route that they're going down.
They've already got subscription-based kind of, if you pay for the phone over a monthly installment plan, you're paying, whatever, it's $30, $40. You're doing that every month. Or iCloud services, you're paying, a $1 or $2 a month, whatever it might be. They just haven't amped that up in a way that's more meaningful, where, a cable operator might.
There's also something, there's something about services you also have to consider. With the growth of some areas of services, there's also the decline in others as people aren't purchasing music anymore and they're not purchasing movies anymore. And so as certain areas of services go up, certain areas are going down. And you're absolutely right. They're padding those numbers with transactional sales, what they really call services. So it's really not easy to determine the real growth of this area. And I think you're also too easily dismissing the issues with Spotify and Netflix in going so into services versus looking at the future, which is autonomous cars and Internet of Things in your home. And I think not being in there is really a problem for them. So they've solved the iPhone is our only product thing by just charging more and making a great phone, which I'm happy about. But I'm also thinking, what about 3 to 5 years from now, where are we going to be?
Let me also just mention the China numbers here, because that's been a big question mark hanging over the company. Their sales in China rose for the first time since early 2016, and we're still looking for evidence about whether the iPhone 8 is selling well there because of the lucky 8 number, or whether the X will appeal because it's just such a unique type of product.
Some of this might be a macro China issue, because we heard about this last night on Qualcomm's call. Qualcomm CEO Steve Mollenkopf telling me actually before the call that they saw broad-based geographical strength, and actually the domestic Chinese smartphone makers are doing particularly well, not just in China, but across Asia, and they're growing their average selling prices as well, moving into premium categories. So if you're seeing that in China as well,
for Apple, because they've basically gone from having decent market share there to losing it quite substantially. They have to defend that and grow that share, right?
And they had an issue not that long ago with the watch, where Chinese government said, "Hey, hold on, stopping that," because there was this weird issue with the cellular connection and how they were tagged and who was identified. So hardware is always easier to sell in China because it's hardware. It's not a media thing.
But I would also just say the consumer in general in China is actually doing quite well, right? And that's the whole part of the strategy of this government, is to really become a more consumption-based economy versus an export, right?
It's lifting a lot of boats right now.
You're hearing it across the board from a lot of different companies that consumer is spending more.
Probably supporting the whole global economy. Ross, we got to go. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Ross Gerber, Ed Lee, Steph and John, stay with us for just a moment, if you will. Boldly going where no network has gone before, CBS turned to the iconic Star Trek franchise to bolster its streaming service, CBS All Access. Up next, what CBS just said about the paid TV landscape on its conference call. We'll come right back. The CBS earnings call is underway. Julia Borson has some interesting comments that the CEO just made. Julia?
That's right, Kelly, with CBS beating earnings estimates by 4 cents, reporting earnings of $1.11 per share. CEO Les Moonves kicked off his comments by saying CBS's growth is because CBS is different from all the other media players. He said it's because cord cutting has a measurable positive impact on the company.
Where others worry about cord cutters, we don't. We're ready for them. We welcome that. In fact, Where others are losing subs to cord cutters, we are growing.
Moonves announcing that its digital service CBS All Access will launch internationally next year. He also said that while NFL ratings are down, he said the NFL is still the best game in town. Kelly, back over to you.
All right, CBS shares down about 1%. Julia, thank you. Starbucks also getting hit hard on the back of earnings. We'll tell you what to listen for on that conference call when we come right back. Then ahead on Fast Money, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer will weigh in on the Republican tax plan in a first on CNBC interview next hour. We'll be right back.